So we were under the assumption that 13.24 was the final patch of the season, but Riot decided to throw a curveball and issue patch 13.24b, which actually has some big meta-shifting implications. You could even argue that 13.24b is more impactful than 13.24, as we are seeing nerfs to heavy hitters like Syndra, Orianna, and Sylas, who have been regulars in our mid lane OP tier for a while. We've got more Hui buffs as well, so Riot's slowly but surely trying to get the champion out of that 30% win rate zone. So with the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data, let's get you guys set up with what should be our final tier list update for Season 13. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. One change that affects top lane for 13.24b is the nerf to Yone. Yone has been one of the most played top laners in recent patches and can be a very frustrating champion to play against, so Riot's decided to crack down. W shield strength has been reduced by a significant amount, going from 60 scaling to 80 to 40 scaling to 90. This forces us to shift Yone down into the top lane B tier as a champion that you should only be playing if you're extremely proficient on the pick. If you want that duelist top laner who runs Hullbreaker, there are so many easier and stronger options now, like Trundle and Jax. With the Yone nerf being the only top lane change of the patch, there's no reason to make any other adjustments to the top lane tier list. OP tier will continue to feature Malphite, Nasus, and Trundle. Malphite is the all-around best solo queue tank that you can play for solo queue right now, as he's extremely easy to pick up, yet very effective each and every game. Trundle, of course, has seen a big spike in power due to his recent buffs, and is now in that upper echelon when it comes down to your duelist split push top laners. As for Nasus, he's a phenomenal low elo pick right now. Falls off a bit for Diamond and above, but for the majority of the player base, if you can farm your Q stacks and play off the level 6 spike, that simple game plan goes a long way in ensuring you always make a consistent impact. A few top lane bans that are highest priority for this patch include Jax, Trundle, and Malphite. Trundle, Nasus, and Garen are 3 top laners we would highly recommend for the lower ranks. The lone jungler buff for 13.24b has been Warwick. Q monster percent health cap has been increased from 100 scaling to 200 to 150 scaling to 210. W active cooldown drops by 20 seconds at all ranks. W bonus movement speed is the same at rank 1, but is increased more significantly with each level you put in the spell, going up by 10% at max rank. Warwick has been completely absent from the solo queue meta for a long time now, and despite these buffs, we don't really see that changing. A fringe A tier pick is the furthest we see these buffs taking Warwick, but for now, he'll remain in the jungle B tier. So the jungle tier list won't be seeing any movement for 13.24b, as the OP tier belongs to just one champion, being Nocturne. The jungle meta has actually got quite interesting in recent patches, as there are so many new picks that have shot up in strength. The brand jungle is a completely new one and super fun to play, so if you're tired of playing the same old junglers all the time, definitely look into Brand, as he's not just fun but also extremely powerful. Trundle is actually being quite heavily slept on in the jungle right now due to his recent buffs. We've seen Trundle explode in popularity up in the top lane, but in the jungle, not so much. If you enjoy those skirmishing junglers who can contest early crabs and always be looking for opportunities to fight, then Trundle is a great pickup, as his early game dueling strength is hard to match. Trundle is especially good into AD junglers, as his Q steals the enemy's AD, which is a big reason to why he is such a lethal 1v1. A few jungle bans you may want to consider right now include Briar, Nocturne, or Evelynn. Brand, Shyvana, and Nocturne are who we would advise you to spam to climb low elo the fastest. Mid lane is the role that steals the show for 13.24b, as there are a plethora of changes we have to cover. Let's start off with some of the bigger meta shifting nerfs, and first up is Orianna. Base health has been reduced from 600 to 585. W movement speed is down as well, from 30 scaling to 50% to 20 scaling to 40%. Nerfs aren't the end of the world for Ori, but she won't be the unanimous best solo queue mid laner any longer. We're going to be shifting Orianna down from S and into A tier. Syndra is next in the chopping block, and the nerfs look to target the scaling strength of the champion. Q-AP ratio has been lowered from 70 to 60%. Pretty significant nerf here, and for her main DPS spell, this kind of change will definitely add up throughout the course of an extended fight. Similar to the Ori nerf, the change doesn't completely destroy Syndra and make her unplayable by any means, but it's significant enough to warrant a push from S and into A tier. Sylas has been hit with a couple of nerfs to his W, as Riot has targeted both the damage and heal. W base damage has gone down by 5 at all ranks, while the AP ratio drops from 90 to 80%. W base heal stays the same, however, the AP ratio has been lowered from 40 to 35%. The AP ratio nerf to Sylas W is going to be felt in those mid-game fights where you're able to get multiple rotations of spells off. We do have to take into account that Sylas has been extremely OP in recent patches though, so the nerf should not reduce his relative strength all that much. As we did for Orianna and Syndra, we're just moving Sylas down one tier, going from OP and into S. Moving on to all the mid lane champion buffs now, let's have a look at what Riot has cooked up for Hui. Base health has been been increased by 30, while base movement speed is up as well from 325 to 330. Base mana has been increased from 445 to 480. WW shield timing has been changed so that it works instantly instead of when the cast finishes. WW base shield has been increased significantly at the later ranks, going from 90 scaling to 170 to 100 scaling to 200. This should actually lead to a greater variety in the skill order for Hui, as most players have been maxing W out last, but maxing it second now in select cases is much more worth it. EW setup delay and EW fire delay have both been reduced slightly, going down by 0.05 seconds each. EW chase range is up from 500 to 600. And lastly, EW linger duration is going from 1.35 scaling to 3 seconds based on travel distance to a flat 3 seconds regardless of the distance traveled. So the big buff in there is definitely to Hui's WW shield at max rank. Diving into some analytics, players who max W out second on Hui are actually winning more than those who max E out second. And this is even before the W buffs have had very much time on live servers. Of course, W is more of a utility spell, so if you find yourself in a game to where you're looking to push an advantage, maxing E second makes more sense. But if you have fallen behind and are looking to provide more utility for your teammates, W max second is a great option. Now, despite these buffs being on live servers for a few days, they haven't led to a drastic increase in Hui's overall solo queue win rate. We suspect Hui could very well end up like a Felios or a Zir in the sense that he'll never be a very high win rate champion for solo queue just due to his immense skill floor. At the same time though, those who spend hundreds of games on the champion and really master Hui will be greatly rewarded, so even though he may not be rated very highly on our tier list for the average player, that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't pick him up if you really want to grind out the games and master him. For the time being, Hui will remain in the mid lane C tier, but we'll be tracking him closely throughout the patch to monitor his progression. One mid lane champion who's been in dire need of a buff for a long time and finally getting some attention for 13.24b is Corki. Riot's not holding back either here, as they have buffed Corki's base AD quite significantly, going from 55 to 59. This is really big for that Trinity Force spike and should provide Corki with a much stronger early to mid game. Now, to compensate though, Riot will be lowering Corki's AD growth from 2.8 to 2.5. If our math is correct, what this means is that Corki is just straight up buffed up until level 15. Level 15 onwards, the reduction in AD growth will outweigh the base AD buff, and Corki will be ever so slightly weaker. This should be an overall win though, as it's always been Corki's early game that has held him back, so a bit less scaling power to help out his biggest weakness is a solid trade-off. Corki's health is also seeing a similar treatment, as base health is up from 588 to 610, but health growth is down from 105 to 103. So exactly like the base AD changes, this is a buff for Corki's early game up until level 13 to where it becomes a nerf. All in all, if you're able to use these early game buffs to provide yourself with more advantages, then the late game nerfs should not matter at all. If you end up with more gold early on due to having more early game strength, then losing a tiny bit of base health and AD won't matter in the grand scheme of things. In regards to Corki's tier list placement, he'll be leaving the basement, going from C into B tier for 13.24b. Naafiri has fallen off quite hard, not really power-wise but popularity-wise, so Riot has issued a buff to bring a bit more attention back to the pack. The play rate of Naafiri has fallen to just above 1%, which is not something that Riot wants to see for a relatively new release. As a result, we have a buff to Naafiri's E cooldown, going from 11 scaling to 9 seconds to 10 scaling to 8 seconds. Nothing too massive here, and like we mentioned, this buff is likely just being pushed to remind people that the champion still exists. Naafiri will be placed in the mid lane S tier for patch 13.24b. So if we dive into the mid lane tier list, the role sees a pretty massive shakeup. OP tier completely shifts from where it was just 2 patches ago, as we have a whole new look with Talon, Galio, and Fizz. With Sylas dropping out of OP tier due to his nerfs, we've decided to move Fizz up as he's been on the edge of OP in recent patches, and all the indirect nerfs to mid in 13.24b help him a ton. Fizz has always been a pretty solid pick against Syndra and Orianna, so the fact they are weaker but still likely to be played quite a bit bodes very well for him. Fizz also completely stomps all over Hui right now, winning 66% of the time in the matchup, which is just an absurd stat. The only meta matchup that Fizz has actually had a negative win rate against in recent patches has been Sylas, so with the champ nerfed, it's a big win for Fizz too. We're also seeing Twisted Fate making a push back into meta as of recent, so there's just so many external factors that are pushing Fizz over the top. Speaking of TF, we have moved him into the mid lane S tier for patch 13.24b, as the cumulative effects of changes over the past while has led to his priority rising. Twisted Fate got some direct buffs back in 13.17 and 13.22, and now that Syndra and Ori have been nerfed, it gives him room to move up in priority. The AP ratio buff to Twisted Fate's Q in 13.17 has also led to a shift in builds for the champ, as more and more players are building heavier AP with Ludens, Lichbane, and Rabadons instead of Everfrost and Fire Cannon, which has led to far greater results. A few of the highest value mid lane bans of the patch include Talon, Fizz, and Sylas. Start spamming one of Mal's, Brand, or Aurelion Sol if you want to climb out of low elo. This patch was heavily skewed towards mid lane, as we don't have a single buff or nerf to any ADC. So looking at the ADC tier list, list, there's no reason to make any adjustments for 13.24b. Vayne will remain on top as the best solo queue ADC. Something we'll continue to track for the next little while is the viability of Hui in the ADC role. Hui is actually seeing more success in the ADC role than in mid lane, although the sample size is still quite small, so it's hard to say just yet how reliable the data really is. Hui scales absolutely incredibly and has some really good follow-up damage if the enemy is CC'd. Mid lane can be a bit more tricky to maneuver with Hui in certain matchups, as he is quite susceptible to champs like Fizz, Talon, or Katarina, who can punish Hui's lack of a gap closer. Vice versa, in the bot lane against traditional ADCs, it's a little easier early in lane and you can more reliably go even or win lane. Landing Hui's skill shots become much easier if he's playing beside a champion like Nautilus or Leona, so there's a lot of potential for him in the ADC role. A couple of the best bans for ADC this patch include Jinx, Vayne, and Draven. Some of the best low elo carries for bot lane consist of Ziggs, Misfortune, and Jinx. Just like ADC, there was not a single change that affected the support role for 13.24b, so let's jump right into the tier list. 3 champions lock down OP tier slots, as we have Zyra, Blitzcrank, and Janna leading the way. If you're any rank ranging from Iron to Emerald right now, Zyra is definitely the pick we would recommend you prioritize. Much less reliance on your ADC when playing Zyra, and a ton of kill threat post 6, which gives you more agency over how games play out. Janna is definitely a more high elo skewed pick, but she's still very strong for the lower ranks as well, especially due to the recent buffs where you now max W out first and run Hail of Blades. Blitz is just all around the most impactful melee catch support that you can play, and has been ever since his buffs a couple patches back. Ban priority in the support role should be centered around Senna, Blitzcrank, and Rakan. To escape low elo from the support role, look into playing one of Brand, Zyra, or Morgana. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So there you have it guys, our final update to the solo queue tier list for Season 13. Thanks for watching, good luck with your end of season rank climbs, and we'll see you in the next one.